Hi, this is Kelly, and you're watching Reading Between the Legs. This is honest talk on sex, health, and soul. So today we are talking about sex and the media. I know, so much to talk about. I had to pick like a small piece of it today, and then we will just talk about more on another episode because there's so much I want to talk about when it comes to this subject. So there's like the gender roles, stereotypes, body image issues. There's sexualization of men and women, targeted advertisements toward different sexes. I mean, the list can just go on and on. And I know I've been affected by the media in some ways, but I try so hard to look at it through the lens of it not being any kind of reality. It's really only entertainment. And this is really the purpose of the episode today. So I have to say this. I understand that sex itself can be very controversial and that it's not my goal at all today. My goal today is to educate you a little bit and for you to be more mindful of sex in the media. I'm not here at all to tell you how to believe about sex or sexuality. I'm using this information that I have read and learned through my studies in human sexuality, which I understand can also be like very uncomfortable to some people, controversial as well. I am likely going to talk about some subjects that are a little bit out there and you may not agree with them, but it's sort of intentional because I really just want to make a point. So please don't take offense by anything. And honestly, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but if you do take offense, my show may just not be for you, which is okay. It's not for everybody, and I get that. So my basic thought about sex and sexuality in the media is that it's so vastly different from reality, and even more from what we are taught about real sex. Rarely on TV or in movies do we see couples discussing like contraception, using condoms even, talking about how they can have safe sex. You don't see them talking about their sexual history or past, or if they have a history of STDs even. Actually, that's like the rarest thing. I rarely see anybody talking about STDs on TV. In most media, we are still so far behind in showing homosexual or bisexual relationships, especially in a positive way. The guys in media that haven't had sex yet are often seen as not good enough or not cool enough, or there's something has to be wrong with them. And women that are sexually active are viewed as slutty and really irresponsible. So one like very quick example, which I'm sure most of you know about, is the 40-Year-Old Virgin, which first of all, I love this movie. It's a fantastic comedy. But what is the message in this movie? Basically, if you wait for the right one, the right time, or you're just not ready to have sex yet, and you're 40 years old, there is like something totally wrong with you. And that's all that's discussed in that movie, basically. I can't even imagine how some men that are in their 30s that haven't been sexually active yet could have felt watching that. Like I said, it's a great comedy, but what are we telling young men? That if you don't lose it early enough, you're just not good enough and you must be a nerd, you're not cool, or there's just like something wrong with you. Or I think I actually make this comment in the movie, you must be gay if you haven't had sex yet. Too often, the message in movies and TV is this man and woman having this crazy, passionate sex. They're always so like portrayed as like sexy people, always fit, usually very confident, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, under the influence. Also, masturbation is a huge joke in movies and TV shows, especially when it comes to young men. It's often viewed in a very negative way. Actually, I've never seen it viewed in a positive way on TV or in a movie. And the kids are always shown as embarrassed if they get caught. And you also never see any sort of discussion happening. Like if a parent catches the kid, you rarely see a discussion happening on TV about, hey, what is this? What are you doing? Let's talk about good things about this. One other theme, especially in these teen movies, is this notion, like I said earlier, that it's so cool to lose your virginity. I just keep thinking about like all these shows, movies, especially when I was younger, where everybody's at this huge high school party, their senior last party, and all the boys are trying to have sex with somebody, especially like the hot girl, and they're all just getting drunk and trying to lose their virginity. So I know that most of you know this, especially if you're an intelligent person, you know this. This is not reality at all. Now, I don't know about you, but what I know about real sex is that it is rarely like any of that. It's messy, clumsy, sweaty, and not always the best sex ever. And by the way, people of all shapes and sizes and ages have sex. And they have sex with people of all shapes and sizes and different sexes, including having sex with yourself. Masturbation is a common act. Most comprehensive sex education programs discuss masturbation as a healthy thing. There's research that shows that people who masturbate actually have higher self-esteem, and it allows for a person to understand their bodies better. But like I said, the media does not portray it as a positive act, or more importantly, something that's done by women. Hello, we're like sexual people and beings too. A research paper that I read recently showed that young men and women weren't comfortable at all with a discussion about masturbation. And most of the time, they only learned about it in the media. And what are they learning about it in the media? Not anything positive, usually. Some of the young people in this study discussed how they'd never had any kind of conversation about masturbation with anyone other than their friends, and that was very rare. So they're learning these things from TV and the movies, and they're learning about it in a very negative light. And usually they believe that it's something that should be avoided or controlled. So what's my concern with all of this? Why can't we just enjoy entertainment? Well, you can, for sure. But I worry about its impact and what we look at on TV. Like, so this stereotypical relationship or sexual encounter that most of us don't fit into. Like, we've created this little box of what this should look like, and most of us don't fit into that. My biggest concern really is how this impacts younger people and how they can get a false view of what relationships and sexuality should look like. So there's this other study that I read recently, and it was done on kids age 14 to 16. It found that 57% of its respondents used media as a source of sex education and information. The three most types of media they used were TV, movies, and the internet. Now, that's kind of like scary to me. I mean, it also included parents, teachers, the people in church as well. But 57%, that's more than half of those children were using media for like sex ed, basically. This is also, I think, exacerbated by the fact that some sex ed is not fantastic and not always fact-based. Now, I know sex ed is a demanding and super controversial topic, and I'm going to talk about it one day, but I'm not going in depth too far. But I will say that there are education programs that leave a lot of room for young minds to wander. They don't learn about consent and pleasure in health class. And if they aren't hearing it like in health class, then they think the truth is what they see in the media. And there's not always discussions about condom use or safe sex. And then they're not seeing it in the movies, so they think, well, I guess that's not important. I don't need to use that. We also see in the movies people having sex with strangers, like all the time. And you never see any of these people getting STDs. I don't think I've ever seen that. So in the same study that I was talking about, those adolescents said they used media as a source of information. They were the most likely to believe that engaging in sex would be a positive outcome always and had very little risks. So that's what I'm saying here. Like, that's super scary to me that they think, well, it's always going to be a positive thing because it's almost always positive when I see it on TV or in the movie. So these are just like some really small examples of what concerns me. And I know you may be thinking, Kelly thinks we just need to stop watching TV and stop watching movies, or my kids should be totally limited from the media at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. My message here is actually to understand the difference between reality and all the glamour that's portrayed in TV. And most of all, actually, let's just open up the conversation a little bit to our friends, family, our people that we're in relationships with, and especially kids, about what real sex and real relationships look like. I remember when violence in the media, like when there were a bunch of school shootings, the first ones, and there was all this violence in the media, and there was this topic about how violence in the media was making violence happen outside with our children or younger people. And I remember there being this big discussion about, well, we just need to talk to our children about the difference between violence in, video games or on TV and violence in real life, or what is real life, what's real life expectations, what really happens to you if you create a violent act of some sort. So why can't we just do the same thing? Like, let's just do the same thing about sex in TV and movies. We see it, we talk about it. If it's not reality, let's talk about what is reality. I mean, I know it all comes down to this. Like, sex is such a taboo subject, and I honestly can, barely stand it sometimes. And I'm not just talking about sex, like the act of sex and reproduction. I'm talking about relationships, sexuality, masturbation, consent, pleasure. I'm talking about all the things we all should be discussing with each other. The effects of media are not just on young adults and adolescents. I think it affects all of us in some way. We see, for instance, we see naked people or half-naked people, basically, on TV and think, well, I don't at all look like that. So there has to be something wrong with me. Or, like I talked about earlier, this man or a young man that hasn't, engaged in sex yet. And it's always portrayed like, oh my gosh, you have to do this. You're a guy. It's like your rite of passage. You have to have sex at a young age. So how do those men feel that are, early 20s, late 20s, mid 30s that haven't had sex yet? And what's wrong with that? Maybe a guy is even asexual, which, by the way, is a real thing. And when do we see couples in movies having any sort of real discussion? Do we discuss about their sex lives other than they're just not doing it enough? First of all, since when was there a quota about doing it enough? How much sex is enough sex? And second, did you know that there's studies out there that show that people in relationships that have constant conversations about their sex lives can actually improve their overall relationship. It's just always portrayed in movies that people just figure it out, or they get divorced, which is another big problem. But rarely do those things just happen. There should be a constant conversation between anyone in any sort of relationship, especially a sexual relationship. So we have this totally distorted view of romantic relationships, and usually negative. So they're showing unsatisfied people, uncommitted relationships. You see people, in the break room, or the guys and I hate to point out guys, but it usually is in the media, guys in the, gym talking crap about their wives and how annoying they are and they don't get enough sex. And it's just such a common theme. Oh my gosh, it drives me crazy. But whatever just happened to people just liking each other and like talking about their relationship. Av and I were just talking about this the other day, actually. So for the most part, we really enjoy each other and each other's company. And we are not perfect. That's not at all what I'm saying. We definitely have had days where we need space. We've definitely had weeks where we did not want to talk to each other. But my point here is that we've gotten through that because we talk about our relationship like constantly. And I'm not just talking about sex with each other, but the whole relationship. And in the media, I honestly can only I can only think of one time that I've like seen any sort of couple in a positive way sit down and talk to each other. Like, and it's just the show I'm watching right now. So what kind of effect does that have on us? Like, relationships are always bad and they always end badly. So there was another study I was reading. So I'm preparing for this episode and I was reading a bunch of, trying to get some factual information. And there actually is like there's a relationship between your expectations of your, sexual relationship or marriage and the commitment that comes with it in what we see and how much you like watch TV or movies, especially ones that show relationships, like I was saying, in a bad way. So, it totally, and it makes sense to me. That all makes sense because we know, and we've seen studies and research that shows that people that grow up in, bad homes, not bad homes, but homes with a lot of unhealthy relationships around them or abusive relationships, they're more likely to be in those kind of relationships as well. So, of course, there's a similar effect on TV. If we are engaged in this, most people like 4 to 5 hours a day, then they start thinking it's reality, especially reality TV. Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on reality TV. But, we're made to believe that this is what life should just be like. Also, let's talk about the increased media usage. And I know that there's probably a lot of talk about this and you've read about it, but I just want to briefly mention it because it's like we're together watching TV, but we're not together. Like, we're not with each other. We are with the TV in the same room, basically, or on our phones in the same room, not engaging at all. And I haven't read a lot about that, but it has to have a serious effect on our relationships. It's like, so we went out to eat the other night and we see a couple sitting next to us, both of them, the entire dinner, 45 minutes to an hour, we were there with them. And both of them, I don't think they even looked up from their phone to eat, honestly. Like, no communication whatsoever. Maybe it was a first date and they just didn't like each other. I guess it's very possible. But, and I'm not saying that we don't do this, because we totally do. I mean, like, literally right now, and it's most days, there's probably a couple hours where we're in totally different rooms, both with our headphones on, do our own thing. And that's okay. We make it work for us. But my concern always is, who's not making it work? And when are we going to figure out that this pull of our phone and our media and TV is actually really negatively affecting our relationship, especially when people don't talk to each other. So that's really my takeaway message. Like, engage in media, watch TV, watch your movies, but be cautious and be mindful of what you're taking away from it and how much time you're spending doing it. And number one, talk to your children, your friends, your family, and most important, your children, but people that you are in relationships with. And please, if something uncomfortable comes on the television or in a movie, do not change it. Address it. It's so uncomfortable to you, probably like everybody else in the room, and that's because we were taught at a young age that it should not be talked about. not, or it's wrong, it's bad, or we got that view from watching the media. So let's talk about why that's like, what is that stigma? What's going on in the media, or what's going on in this movie, and what's reality, really? Or what are you taking away from that? So I love this book. It's called Talking to Your Kids About Sex by Laura Berman. It's fantastic. So there's this whole chapter actually on media, and I want to read a couple of a couple things to you, just because I think that it's going to help you think about, so how does the media affect me? So I'm just going to read a couple. So what type of media has the most impact on you? Is it television, film, books, music? Overall, do you think the media has a positive or negative impact on your self-esteem and your perspective on the world? What do you think about body image in the media? Which is a big one, and I'm actually going to talk about that next episode. How does the media affect your perception of sex in romantic relationships? That's a big one. How do you think it affects your child's perception of sex and romance? Or your child's perception of the world in general? And this is a good one too. I love this one. This is a good one to really think about. How do romantic scenes in movies impact your expectations for your own relationship? And what does that impact have on your child? So just a couple things for you guys to think about. Really, seriously, if you have a kid or you're thinking about having kids, I really would pick this up. I think you can get it on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. I actually got it at a clinic I worked for because we do a lot of sex ed. So in my job, I do a lot of sex ed. So it's really good to think of like different perspectives, and really we have to think about what are our own thoughts before we can talk to our children or other people. So it's good to, step back, think, what is my own perspective, and how can that affect maybe how I discuss it with my children or my spouse. So I really want to end the stigma that is on sex and sexuality, especially as it affects women. I don't know that I can change what's in the media, but maybe I can change just how one of you look at it, or I can change how you perceive what real is versus in the media. Or maybe I can help you talk to your children a little bit more about the media and how it affects all of us and how it's not real. And this is what reality is. So there's this certain view of women in the media, and we have to be so cautious about it. And I'm actually going to talk a lot about that next episode. That's all I'm going to talk about, honestly. The recent poll that I did on Facebook did so well that I talked about just kind of basic sex in the media today. But next time we're going to talk about designer vaginas, which I know sounds kind of wacko. But really, there's a lot of stuff out there that we see on TV, in magazines, of how vaginas should look or how women should take care of themselves versus reality. And I want to hit upon that next episode. So please stay tuned. It's going to be a really good one. I'm super excited about this next one. I hope you all have a fantastic day. And thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks. Bye.